For the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about evolution. In this picture, you see an adorable star-nosed mole that has become adapted to its environment. The claws allow it to dig through the ground. The finger-like appendages on its nose allow it to sense vibrations in the ground. Even its reduced eyes are adapted for life underground. So what is evolution? Evolution is change over time and explains how descendants are different from their ancestors. In the picture to the left, we have the evolution of the modern horse. Horses started out really small, but over time, and through human intervention, the horse became much bigger. Not only that, but the structure of the hoof also changed. While early horses were adapted to differing terrains, over time, the toes began to fuse. It became more advantageous that horses were faster and could jump higher than horses that could navigate through various terrains. Evolution doesn't always apply to living things. Non-living things may also need to adapt. The Corvette has changed several features about its vehicle, not only for safety purposes, but also for the demand of the consumer. Consumers want faster, louder, and sleeker Corvettes so that the 1953 Corvette looks completely different than the 1978 Corvette, and much, much different than the 2020 Corvette. Had Chevy not changed the look of the Corvette, we may not see them on the roads today. The biological definition of a species is a group of organisms that can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. We have a horse that mates with a horse to produce a horse, of course. However, a donkey mated with a horse produces a mule, which would not be considered a species because it cannot produce fertile offspring. It is infertile. Other examples are the tiger and the lion making a liger, and a zebra and a donkey making a zonkey. One of the most influential scientists, and one of my personal favorites, is Charles Darwin. He is the father of evolution and was able to determine that natural selection was the driving force of evolution. In order for natural selection to happen, four requirements must be met: adaptation, overproduction, variation, and descent with modification. What is natural selection? It is a process where individuals with beneficial adaptations will produce more offspring than individuals with less beneficial adaptations. You may have heard it summarized as survival of the fittest. Those individuals with more beneficial adaptations will also increase that organism's chance to survive. That makes sense when you think of the claws and nose of the mole. In humans, an interesting adaptation occurred with malaria and sickle cell anemia. Individuals that carried the sickle cell trait were able to fight off malaria more than individuals without the sickle cell trait. It became an advantage to carry the sickle cell disease, as those individuals without sickled cells would die from malaria. Next is variation. A variation is a difference in a trait. While Darwin was traveling and observing different organisms on the Galapagos Islands, he came across Galapagos finches and noticed small differences in their beak sizes. Those with large beak sizes were able to crush the larger seeds, while those with smaller beak sizes were able to eat the smaller seeds. Darwin was able to determine that this was due to the amount of precipitation that the different islands were receiving, and as there was more precipitation on an island, the larger the seed size would be. We see all sorts of different variations in humans, with blood types being an important variation. So you can have a blood type of A, B, AB, and O. The driving force behind all these variations is mutation, which is a change in DNA sequence. The vast majority of mutations are deleterious, but the small chance that a variation is beneficial will introduce a new trait into the population. Contrary to variation is artificial selection. Artificial selection is human intervention in the breeding of animals for specific traits. Artificial selection decreases variation because we only breed the animals who have specific traits that we desire. Think of horse racing. Horse breeders want horses whose fathers and mothers have won in the past. The most famous Kentucky horse, Secretariat, was a tremendous horse who had a larger heart and a longer gait than your average horse. He owns the record for all three major horse races, and it was artificial selection that ultimately created that magnificent horse. Another requirement for natural selection is overproduction. Overproduction occurs when more offspring are produced than can possibly survive. This is significant because it ensures that the ones that survive are the most fit. In the example, 90% of those tadpoles will die, but the 10% that survive are the most fit and carry on those strong genes to the next the next generation. Thomas Malthus was an economist who theorized that the rate of growth exhibited by humans would cause humans to ultimately run out of food. He theorized that while resources grew at an arithmetic rate, human population grew at an exponential rate. To increase population size and to combat against overpopulation, resources had to increase. But he also noticed that there were other factors that controlled human populations. War, famine, and disease would also ensure that the human population would not grow out of control. The last requirement for natural selection to occur is descent with modification. This is the idea that species will change over time and that heritable advantageous traits will be passed down. As humans, we belong to the genus and species Homo sapiens. However, it took generations and generations, and we observed that the most advantageous traits passed down were a large cranial capacity, the ability to walk on two legs, and increased endurance for walking, hunting, and protecting ourselves from different organisms. This is further seen in the fossil record we have collected throughout the years, as we have seen differences in skeletal formations, as we began to walk upright, and differences in size of the appendages. You can see the modern human has a much longer leg than any of its ancestors. It appears from the picture that humans transitioned from an arboreal lifestyle, living in trees, to a ground lifestyle. So this was a very, very quick summary of evolution and Darwin's theory of natural selection and evolution. So you have a worksheet to work on that I'm going to upload to Schoology. Make sure to work on that. If you have any questions, find me on Teams. Thanks, guys.